Today, I have a serious subject that we're going to talk about. I really hope that you stick around for the entire podcast. I know some of you like to jump around in the podcast to get to certain bits, but seriously, there are so many good things in this podcast that you really need to listen to the whole thing. Today, we're going to talk about mental health. I know it's not a sexy subject to talk about, but seriously, we need to have discussions. You know that I'm not a big fan of politicians coming in and solving things because, well, they don't. They make things worse. We need to come together as an industry, not even just as an industry, but as, human beings, and help people out. I have Sarah Joy Albrecht from Hold My Guns. We're going to talk about mental health and the mission of Hold My Guns. She's got some great information here. She had me thinking about some things because we all have this image of mental health. Maybe it's, a teenager that just won't engage in conversation, or a veteran that is withdrawn, or active duty, whatever your imagination can bring up. That's what you think. But it's more than that. And I learned so much just talking to her today. I have the links down below. Go check out Hold My Guns. They are the sponsor for the podcast today. And, I don't get anything from Hold My Guns. This is definitely a mission that's worthwhile. Without further delay, Sarah, tell me about your love of guns.
Good morning, everyone. This is Sarah Joy Albrecht. I am the founder and executive director for the 501c3 nonprofit Hold My Guns. What we do is we partner with gun shops across the United States to provide voluntary firearm storage during times of crisis or personal need, such as deployment or selling your home. I also am a certified QPR, suicide prevention instructor. QPR stands for Question, Persuade, and Refer. And I enjoy teaching people about how they can bring hope to the people around them through being able to observe warning signs and clues of someone who might be in crisis, teaching them how to ask questions that are compassionate and caring and help to get to the heart of what's going on in that person's life, and then helping them learn how to refer them to resources that are helpful. All of these things combined help to save lives, to protect property, and preserve rights. And it is my joy to be here today.
Thanks for joining me, because this is, we were talking a little bit off air about how kind of this is an important subject for me. And one of the things that kind of stands out, I've seen it in your literature, and you just said it again, is about preserving property and rights. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a stigma around mental health, right? I mean, it's good, bad, indifferent. There's a stigma out there that with mental health problems, you will lose rights. And it doesn't need to be that way, correct?
There is a stigma out there, and it is not, it's not something that is a false stigma. I'm not quite saying that in the best way, but yeah. There really is a good reason for concern as gun owners, pertaining to if you disclose to someone who does not have an understanding of firearms and the normalcy of firearms, there's a possibility that practitioner might report you just simply for having a firearm. And it is that kind of reality that, I just want to put a plug in for Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, that they have even created a kind of a network of doctors who care about preserving rights. And so one of my backgrounds before I founded Hold My Guns was that I was a doula for 11 years. And I learned the importance of patient advocacy and learning about how decisions simply like not putting antibiotic ointment on a baby's eyes when they were first born can all of a sudden flag that person with child protective services for, harming their child. And so I learned a lot about medical freedom, and it really carries over into medical and mental health freedom. And I have a strong understanding of how, a well-intentioned situation, for somebody seeking help can really go sideways. And so I always encourage people to be wise about that and to be I don't want to discourage people to get help. Please don't hear it that way. But I want for you to make sure that you're getting help that's appropriate, that that you vet the people that you share the personal details of your life with. And when you can do that, the help that you get is tremendous. And so seeing that stigma was part of the reason why I founded Hold My Guns. I know that there are many gun owners out there. Owning a firearm is normal. It's a very American thing. But people are concerned about getting help because many times doctors do ask, are there firearms at home? And even if it's well-intentioned, they don't have an understanding of it. So this provides an opportunity for people to say, actually, my fire, if they choose to, it's up to people what they want to disclose. But there is the option of saying, actually, our firearms are being stored offsite right now because our goal is healing, and that's not a concern. We know that having access to lethal means when people are at risk can increase risk for suicide. So we are temporarily storing our lethal means offsite, and that really de-escalates that conversation, and it empowers people to focus on healing versus being concerned about losing their property and losing their rights. And it really takes a proactive approach, utilizing existing resources from within our own community. We can support one another to empower people to get help and to be safe and wise while they might be facing a difficult crisis, if that's the reason why they're storing their firearms.
I mean, it gives them one less thing to have to worry about when you're talking to a
Yes.
practitioner.
Yes.
Like I know, excuse me, I know a few years back here in Montana, it was common practice for doctors. And it was really weird because it just suddenly became common practice for doctors to ask if there's firearms in the home.
Mm-hmm.
It's Montana. Everybody's got a gun here.
Yeah.
I mean, gun ownership is a thing here. And I remember the first time I had a doctor ask me that, and I'm like, I remember looking at him going, actually, it's none of your business. This has nothing to do with my shoulder that you're getting ready to do surgery on.
Right.
And it was, the question went away. I mean, it did. They just kind of nodded, but it just seemed like all of a sudden HHS wanted to know if there was guns in the homes, and
Right.
and that doesn't help a situation, right? I mean, you're escalating something that doesn't need to be escalated, and especially I like what you're talking about is, choose your practitioner. Last week I was talking to a firearms trainer, and we're talking about choosing the correct firearms trainer. Well, anytime in healthcare, you need to choose a correct practitioner.
Yes.
My mother, I grew up, she was a nurse. She was an OR nurse, and I learned at a young age that you do choose your practitioner. You don't, just because there's a doctor there doesn't mean that's your doctor, right?
Right.
I mean, ask questions, make sure that they're the right fit. And I think if you're a firearms owner and you do need to seek professional help for some type of, I hate saying the word mental illness, but you just need some help, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interview, right? Before you even get down to the fact of you have firearms, interview them to see if maybe their philosophies don't match with yours.
Right. You're hiring them.
Exactly. You're their boss.
Yes. Jason, I want to go back a moment ago to talking about a broken arm. And I do want to talk about suicide risk with a situation like that. It is there, if you have an arm surgery, there's a good chance that you're going to be put on some kind of narcotic pain medication. Mm-hmm. So that is a doctor's concern. and chronic pain is a big risk for suicide. So I think that one of the I guess missions of Hold My Guns is to understand the idea of personal responsibility, and also protecting rights. So we need to know about, making sure that our doctors are on the same page with us when we're hiring them. And we also need to not just say, well, it's not, we can say to our doctors, it's not your business and we have a fire them. But we also have to, I think, understand personally, we don't need to be, we need to allow ourselves to entertain the idea of, wait a second, I might be in a lot of pain after this. I might be on narcotics after this.
Yep.
Do I have a plan for this so that, honestly, my doctors and my support team, my family, my friends, that they know, like, hey, this next couple weeks they might be kind of rough. So we
Right.
developed a personal safety plan, which you can get through the link in the bio for all of our social medias. And A Girl and a Gun helped do a collaborative one that used our words but put it in a beautiful format. But that would be a scenario, talking about personal responsibility, where you might realize, hey, I'm going to have a rough couple of weeks ahead. I do want to make sure, I've had a surgery before I was on Dilaudid, and I felt like I was having an out of body experience. I don't like that drug. And, like just being aware of how different medications can affect you and how pain can affect you. So we don't want to, like, I'm using a colloquialism of, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but just to say, well, it's not your business, but it might not be something we want to share with that doctor. Yeah. However, we don't want to be so arrogant that we say, but it's not a problem at all. And that's where people get in trouble with suicide risk.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because, when we think of, people having, mental health issues, we generally think of long-term issues. And it's not. I mean, it can be a short-term issue where, like you said, I've had 2 shoulder surgeries, I have 2 knee surgeries, I've got a knee replacement coming up. I've had 18 kidney stones. I'm very well aware of narcotics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny because even as I was a kid, I had my first shoulder surgery when I was 18. It was, I don't like drugs. I just don't like them. They're, they have their need. They have their needs. But even then, I've had doctors who are like, you go in for the follow up, and they're like, "Well, how are you doing with, your pain management?"
Mm-hmm.
And I hate the word pain management. I really do.
It's euphemistic. Yeah.
Yeah. And I go, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." They're like, "Well, do you need more? You need, Percocet or whatever they gave you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm good." And they're like, "Well, are you going to run out in the future?" I'm like, "I've been off that stuff for 2 days after surgery. I was done."
Right.
That stuff is out. I don't like that stuff in my body. I don't like what it can do.
But they push it, don't they?
But they do. They don't push it as much anymore. I think now, well, now they push green cards.
Yeah.
So they, because the FDA wants to reduce the narcotics, they just start pushing something else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole thing for me is I don't like that because pain tells me something's wrong. I don't want to be uncomfortable, but I also don't want to do something stupid.
Right.
And, but yeah, I mean, getting hooked on Oxycontin and stuff, that's a real thing. And that can cause, a mental health issue, right? Because that drug is really running your life, not you're not running your life.
And then throw in a factor like alcohol or something else. And right. So
yeah,
I don't want to be so arrogant to say, like, how I think, from a rights perspective, telling a doctor about if I own a firearm, I'm not personally comfortable with that. Although I do have doctors that One of my doctors actually carries in the office. He has his private practice, and so we've had those conversations, but in a totally different context, because we've been friends for a long time. And
Sure.
anyway, but we
What?
just can't be so arrogant that we
No,
discredit like the heart behind
no,
those
it just,
questions.
you need to be
That can harm
selective.
us.
Like
Yes.
that particular doctor did not need to know.
Right.
The actual surgeon, he knows, because I know, I know him.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, he's done a few surgeries on me.
Yes.
He knows what my sport is. He knows I'm a shooter. Because when we go to talk, is like, what's your hobbies? And I go, I do competitive shooting and stuff like that. And then going through physical therapy. And unfortunately, I've been through physical therapy multiple times.
Right.
My therapist knows my routine. I mean, even through my recovery, like now, because of all the knee problems I have, I'm in pretty much physical therapy for the rest of my life. Um, and that we worked that physical therapy out to, to shooting. Like,
Mhm.
I go shooting, and he's like, I don't, I understand the sport, but I've never really seen it. So I remember sitting there with an iPad one time showing, like Jessica Hook and a couple of the other competition shooters, watching them do a stage. He goes, I know exactly what to do. And this movement is a lot like this in baseball and this in basketball. And so, because he's a sports medicine guy.
Cool.
So they put together a program that's my physical therapy program every day, that, these are my movements and stuff like that. So the practitioners that need to know,
Exactly.
and they deal with it. But this particular one was, I mean, this doctor was a resident. They were not my actual doctor.
Yes.
um, they did not need to know. But I'm glad you brought that up, because you're absolutely right. We do need to be truthful to the people that we need to be truthful to. Um,
Or even have
th-
personal awareness, because not every
yes.
like we don't want to take for granted that not everybody has people, right?
Yeah,
But so
exactly.
we need to be personally aware of it. And
Yep.
so the heart of some of those kinds of conversations, it's not, we have to be so careful about how we say things, but
Yes.
the takeaway should be is, oh, okay, pain, narcotics, surgery, might not have support. I might feel like I don't bring value for a little while because I can't mow the
Yep.
lawn or whatever and keep
Yeah.
up with my neighbors. Like we just have to be aware. And mental health is, I think we do a disservice to just undermine like mental health, just thinking of like, a teenager like staring despondently out the window, or
Yeah.
whatever, and then we minimize in our minds like, hey, I could be at risk, because we're thinking it's somebody else, and we have these
Yeah.
like images of what we think a person in mental health crisis looks like, and we're not realizing like, hey, I've got a lot of risk factors going on, and I should probably just do
Yes.
a check and of myself, and just talk to my friends and let them know like, hey, it's been a couple painful days and my neighbors are making fun of my lawn, can you come over and help me out? Like those are
Yeah.
mental health things. So
Yeah. It's funny because, we don't think about that. I like what you say. We think, typical when we think mental health, it's the teenager staring at, teenager dressed up in goth, staring out the window, not talking, and with no expression on their face.
right, it's like, well, that's
Or,
not me, so
yeah, it's
this
not me,
isn't
so
why.
I don't fit that bucket. Or we
Right.
think, an old person with Alzheimer's. Um, but we don't think about multiple times in our lives, we kind of ride this little roller coaster, right?
Yes.
And it could be something as simple like you're saying, um, prescribed narcotics. I mean, yes, they're needed for certain things, but they are mind altering. There's a reason why they say don't operate a car.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
don't make decisions. Don't make financial decisions while you're, for the next 48 hours while this stuff's going through your body. Um,
Hmm.
that kind of goes into, hey, maybe you don't want to have immediate access to that firearm over there, right?
Right.
Maybe if you have your gun safe there and your gun safe's always unlocked, maybe now's a good time to have your spouse just, spin the dial for you, and
Right.
and make sure that all that stuff is really secured.
Right. And those are
Now,
things you can do on your own. And that's in
exactly.
my advocacy, I want for people to practice self-governance. We don't want other people intervening. So we have to step up and take the responsibility and do the hard work, even if it's
Yes.
inconvenient that our safe is now, spun around a little bit.
Yep.
It's something that it's our choice to do. And that actually creates mental strength. So the goal
Exactly.
is to help people to think about, how can I increase the mental strength in my household and in my circle of influence? And that's what we're all about. And that helps to preserve rights, because when we are taking personal responsibility, we are not looking for the outside intervention of the government to tell us how to run our lives. So in order to do that, we have to have an honest conversation with ourselves. That's where it starts.
I'm going to read a quote that you actually put out on LinkedIn yesterday.
Okay.
um, I,
Yay.
I, this popped up on my feed yesterday, and I'm like, oh, it's so great because I get to talk to her tomorrow about. Um, you wrote out there, mental health isn't about seeking a warm, fuzzy feeling. It involves taking personal responsibility. My hope in suicide prevention space is to help foster healthy relationships and increase protective factors,
Mm-hmm.
which is great because, I read that and I went, that's awesome. I love that quote because it's all about, like you said before, taking responsibility and making sure that you're making decision. You're pushing making a decision from a position of making decisions from a position of power, right?
Yes.
You're trying to control things. Um, Now, we've been talking so much, and we're finally going to get to the questions I have, just because this is a great conversation that we're having. Um, what is the mission for Hold My Guns? I know we kind of touched on it a few times.
Mm-hmm. Well, just even kind of going back to that quote, Jason, which thank you for mentioning it. And the context of that quote was that yesterday I shared this cool little, I guess, somebody else's post, but just made some comments on it about the beauty of forgiveness and how to seek forgiveness when you've wronged someone. And relationship issues are one of the big risk factors for suicide. You hear about a breakup or a divorce, someone's been served divorce papers, or someone has died in a relationship, and that person remaining is very heartbroken. And so, that's the context of it. And I appreciate you read that. And so about Hold My Guns, it's really great to have uplifting quotes about mental health and to say, be responsible. But what I found was that there's a need to actually have a place to store firearms. So it's not just like, go and be well, you work it out on your own. Not everybody has friends or family who can store a firearm when a person is in crisis or has a need. My husband was working in Japan for a couple of years, and we had to figure out what to do with our firearms while our family lived over there. So again, it doesn't have to be a mental health scenario, but Hold My Guns, we partner with gun shops across the United States, and we provide storage so that people do have options if they are ever in a scenario like some of the ones that we are talking about today, and they want to be able to make sure that they are safe and have smart decisions. Or maybe it's not even the gun owner themselves. Maybe it is a person in crisis who's in their household. And that's actually one of the reasons why I started Hold My Guns. I'm a range safety officer, and I help with a youth league. So my kids, all 5 of my kids have grown up in shooting sports. And in 2018, one of their friends took her own life with a firearm. She wasn't part of our league. It was somebody else in the community. But my kids came to me and they're like, Mom, we really enjoy shooting sports. We know how important it is to preserve rights, but our friend is dead. And how can we help people in crisis to have a place to store firearms if they need it? And that is how Hold My Guns was born. It took a lot of work. There was a lot of legal considerations, but we worked with Joshua Prince, who is a phenomenal attorney here in Pennsylvania, and he also has his ability to practice in some of the surrounding states here in Pennsylvania. And he helped us to come up with a process that is not reinventing the wheel, but it is utilizing the backbone of the consignment and consignment return process. So for a completed firearm, there is a 4473 and a background check, because it is temporarily going into the books of that FFL. But we can also store a non-serialized critical part, such as a barrel or firing pin. And so these are processes that gun shops are very familiar with already. And it doesn't take a lot of understanding or like extra training, I should say, in order to take in a firearm and to give it back to that person. So that was very important to me, that it was not all FFLs have, storage space for locker services and all of that. So creating a process that any FFL, provided they have general liability insurance in case, there's any damages that occur, because their firearms are investments. So we want to make sure that they're, respected while they're being stored. But really, it's something that any FFL could participate in if they were able to meet that kind of criteria.
So, and that's what we were talking offline earlier about. That's what I think the genius of this is it, like you said, it's not reinventing the wheel. You're using what's already there. There's already a network of licensed firearm dealers, and you're using the existing federal and state and local processes to do that. It doesn't matter. It's not like, hey, you would need to do this, 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 this. No, it's just no different than a fire. Like you said, I was an FFL for 9 years. You receive a firearm, doesn't matter who it came from, right? Unless you're working on that gun and returning the same day, that's completely different with gunsmithing. But if it's going to spend the night, it's got to be logged into your logbook. And then the whole consignment thing was genius to me when I was looking at this, because returning that firearm, depending on what your state laws are, you are going to have to fill out a 4473. Federal, after so long, you definitely need to fill out a 4473, and that you're just using that system already.
Exactly.
Firearm dealers know how to do background checks. I mean, that's part of the training to get the license. And I wouldn't say the training is all that long. It's about 10 minutes with your ATF agent. You need to do this, 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 this. Good luck. But that's the greatest thing about it, is that, as we do these things every day, it's just no different than any other transfer. You're just returning it back to the original person. Using the consignment law forces a background check, right? To make sure that person is still allowed to own a firearm.
Yes. And I, that's something that, can be controversial. Our goal, though, is because it's a regulated space, it would be a nightmare if that FFL returned a firearm to a prohibited person. So we had to take into considerations like that. But the other thing about the consignment return process is that it allows the FFL, if that person, for example, they're storing their firearm and they disappear, then it allows the FFL to be able to sell that firearm if needed. And I don't want people to hear this and say, "Oh my goodness, they're stealing our guns and selling them." No, what can happen is that the FFL, then, that people ditch their guns with the FFL, and now you have this item that they can't do anything with. So we have very, very, very clear contracts that, it's a minimal storage fee that we have our FFLs set. And maybe they're offering additional, amenities that we allow them to do. Like we'll clean your firearm, or we're going to store it in this special way because this is a $10,000 rifle or something. Right. So we allow them to set their market price for that, but we encourage it to be affordable. But with that, if someone were to just dump a bunch of firearms at an FFL and then walk away, then that FFL has some recourse. And it's very clear. It's like, hey, you haven't paid for 90 days or whatever number the FFL has set, and now you're not stuck with a bunch of firearms that you're, not allowed to do anything with. So it's not just simply to ensure that that an FFL doesn't lose their license because they've, given a firearm to a prohibited person, but also because it helps to protect them from having people just abusing the service. So those are things that you have to consider when you're operating in a regulated space. If you had an IOI come in and be like, whose firearms are these, and what's going on here, we don't want our FFLs to lose their license over it. But that being said, we can store non-serialized parts like a barrel or a firing pin, and that way a person, if they for whatever reason don't want to be involved with that process, or they want to keep their firearm at home because it's a really expensive firearm, or maybe it's a privately manufactured firearm, that they have options as well to make sure those firearms are inoperable. So
that way it's basically a display piece. You have your grandfather's Winchesters over top of the mantle. Sure. That gun missing may cause some questions that you don't want to answer during Thanksgiving dinner.
Right.
So therefore, you could render the firearm inoperable. No one will ever know.
Right.
It's still there. It's where everybody expects it to be, and then nobody needs to ask other questions, right? They don't need to dig into whatever you're dealing with on your personal side. And I'm glad you brought that up about the FFL, because, one of the things I thought of when I first heard about Hold My Guns was, I thought of it from an FFL standpoint because I was an FFL. And I'm like, I'm sitting there going, why would I, as an FFL, why would I ever want to do this? Because I'm going to be stuck with this gun in my safe or in my secure storage area. What happens if they disappear? People move, or we'll say they won the lottery and moved to some nice country down in the Caribbean, and you never hear from them again. What do you do with that firearm at that point? Because you're stuck with them. Because I've actually had some odd transactions, I'll say. And they're odd in the fact of that I've had people that were deployed, and they're like, hey, look, I got this great deal on this gun. I couldn't pass it up. I need you to, I need a place to do the transfer. I'm like, okay, cool. I can take care of that, but I'm not going to be back for 9 months. And I'm like, what's going on? And they're deployed, and they're going through this stuff, and it starts sounding like a scam. But as you start checking them out, because I know people on the we have not Fort McHenry. Sorry, I'm thinking Baltimore, Fort Harrison here in Helena. I go, hey, do you guys happen to know this person? Yeah, he's deployed. Okay, cool, thanks. I'm like, yeah, I can deal with that for you. But hey, because the first thing my wife goes is, what happens if they're on patrol and they hit an IED, or, you start going through these things. I'm like, yeah, I got to think about that. Right. And that's where the consignment law kind of, it's a little different under that situation, because it comes in from another FFL, but still after a certain point, I send them a contract going, hey, and if your deployment gets extended, you need to tell me. Mm-hmm. But after this date, if, I'll start reaching out to you if you haven't started reaching out to me. And then after this date, if I still haven't received word from you, that firearm's mine.
Right. And you might say, I'm able to sell it, and I just want to say, like, good contracts make good neighbors. And it really does help to get rid of a lot of the frustration that, that gun owners might have, or that FFLs might have. And so that's why we invested so much in our contracts with Joshua Prince, because we wanted to be very clear that all parties were protected. We even have in our contract that if there is a court order, that the FFL, it is at the expense of the customer, because someone's got to pay for it, but they will ask for that court order to be sealed, so that the information about firearms, whatever that might be, again, court order warrants all that. It's not just willy-nilly. Right. It's for, there are real scenarios out there like that, but we require that personal information is sealed. And so considerations like that protect privacy are and protect rights. That is a big part of our considerations for our contracts. And, we also have in there, what happens if a person becomes prohibited. It can be transferred to a lawful third party. That is in our contract. If a person dies, we're not reinventing the wheel. That the executor of the estate can bring in a death certificate and they can pick up a firearm. These are normal things that happen in a normal course of business for an FFL. There might be some oddities, like people probably don't die every day and deal with that, but
Right.
there are already procedures in
Car
place.
accidents happen. I
They
mean,
happen.
things happen, right? Yeah.
Yes. And good communication, good contracts, they go far. And we take it seriously because they're investments, and we also take seriously the needs of the FFL. So and both people, gun owners and FFLs, they're people in our firearms community. And so we want to make sure that as much as possible that we advocate for good communication and good practices, which, by the way, contributes to good mental health. So I just want to put that out there as well.
I mean, if you think about it, if you have an FFL, you're not getting an FFL because you hate guns and you hate the community, right?
Right.
I mean, you're actively participating in the community in the regulated space. You have certain things, and that's the one thing you said something in there about, if someone is no longer able to get a firearm, right? For some reason they can't pass a background check, whatever. That's where FFLs are going to freak out a little bit about transferring to a third party, because it sounds a lot like a straw purchase. But the advantage with the contract is that it laid that out already.
Yes.
That
exactly.
scenario has already been addressed. So that way, if you're sitting there talking to an IOI, that one can be explained away, right? This was the contract.
Yes.
No, I did not actively engage in a straw purchase.
Exactly. And you have the address of the gun owner, and it would be very easy to check to see the address on the ID of the person they're transferring it to. And those are the kinds of things that, again, working with an attorney who is well versed in defending rights and understanding firearms related law, that he really put his heart into it to make sure that the FFLs were protected, but that the gun owners were protected too.
Now, you brought something up offline that I hadn't thought of.
Okay.
I'm going to bring it up because both of us have a good friend with Jordan at JSD Supply.
Yes. Yeah.
80% firearms do not have serial numbers, and now with the regulation changes that we think are coming, we're not sure. Maybe they'll get tied up. Maybe they won't. We just won't know until August 24th. Really, what's going to happen? How are we going to address that if we're an FFL and we're in Hold My Guns and someone comes up to us with an 80% firearm with no serial number?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one of the frustrating things is how the ATF can just suddenly overnight redefine things and all of a sudden criminalize gun owners who actually care about doing their best to do things in a lawful way. Although I just want people that when they hear this conversation to recognize that laws change all the time, and that's why it's so important that we have an inalienable right to defend ourselves. And that, I think, supersedes a lot of these laws that are coming out. And I also want people to understand we operate in a regulated space, and I understand the hypocrisy of what that sounds like with Hold My Guns, but it really does. We do our best, to do things in the right way. And most people who are gun owners are not criminals. And to all of a sudden just be hit with this, oh, wow, now you're a criminal because this particular hunk of metal is not serialized. It's a bunch of crap. And it makes me angry. And from a Hold My Guns perspective, again, we can store something that's not serialized. But I just find it really fascinating that, for an entity that's always trying to say like, oh, we're protecting lives and we're doing this to help to reduce access and save lives and blah, blah, blah. It's like, actually,
you're direct opposite.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite. It feels like death by 1,000 paper cuts, which is not good for mental health. And it frustrates a majority of Americans who own firearms. And it just, from that perspective, it makes me angry. I don't know yet what FFLs would have to do if we received a completed firearm, if they would be required to serialize them. But for now, I would say if a person does have a privately manufactured firearm, to don't bring in parts that, you know, have to be serialized if those law changes go into effect, because the goal
That's
is,
our
again, yeah, I mean, the goal is to help people to, in that kind of scenario, to not have access to lethal means. So that's the heart
take
of
the
it.
lower parts, basically take the lower parts kit out, store the unserialized parts
Yes.
with the FFL, keep the finished frame at home. I mean, you know, like with JSD Supply, they're the the P320. You just have that piece of metal with no guts in
Yes.
it. I mean, that's, you know, give the FFL, check everything else in with the FFL at that point.
Yes.
And that's kind of where, making sure that you have a good communications when you check in your firearms, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's why
Communication's everything.
everybody needs to talk back and forth, because what happens if, I don't know, let's just say the Clintons come back to power and suddenly AR-15s are banned, right?
Oh my goodness.
Um, yeah, because that happened kind of back in the 90s.
Theoretically, yeah.
Theoretically, yeah. So, I mean, like you said, laws change.
Right.
This is where making sure that you have good communication with the FFL. The FFL has a good path to communicate back to you, going, "Hey, look,
Mhm.
this law is changing. This may affect you." Um, and then and then at that point, the FFL can work with the individual to figure out what to do. Because
Right.
if that individual is still not capable of, or still, I don't want to say capable, is still not willing to have that firearm, they could have it transferred to a third party,
Right.
right?
Willing is a
At
very
that
good
point,
word. Yep.
go,
We really emphasize personal agency and self-determination there. So
yeah,
yes. And I do want to say, I do know Jordan, and he is a brilliant man, and he is genuine, and we are really
generous.
great. He is generous. We are grateful for the how he's revitalized gun shows here in Pennsylvania. He is just meticulous with the way that he organizes things, but he also always makes sure that people are having fun. And at any
Yeah,
time during the gun show, you will see him in the crowd, and you'll see his family in the crowd. It's a family business, and they are, checking in on people. How's it going today? Would you like a piece of pizza? Like, he's practically the pizza fairy. You can
yeah.
tell him I said that, but he is a genuine person. And on one hand, I am very angry that he's been the target of this, because he's a lightning rod, because he makes decisions and he sticks to his guns. On the other hand, he's a brilliant person he's not going to take this crap, and
Oh,
I know that many
he's
people
not.
are helping him fight it. So it's such a catch-22, because I don't want to wish this kind of thing on anyone. On the other hand, I'm like, come on, Jordan. So we need to support him and
Yeah,
let him know that we appreciate him and his willingness to not kowtow, but to be part of this fight. Because ultimately, like we were talking about earlier, we don't want to just say, oh, well, I don't make my own firearms. I don't put together kits or whatever it is. Right. We could
doesn't
have that.
matter.
It doesn't matter. And the thing is, like, we can get caught up in that, like, well, this doesn't apply to me, but really it does. And it affects, Hold My Guns potentially, but it also affects all of us, to say, like, where will this end? And the heart of it
Yes,
is, if you can have laws just changing all the time, then it can criminalize us. So we need to not say, oh, that's somebody else's problem. We all need to understand
it's
the value of this and protect rights.
it's all of our problem. I mean, I've said several times on the podcast, and I mentioned to you earlier, one of my videos was taken down by five anti-gun senators. It was mine and several other content creators. We had had videos taken down, had strikes issued against our channels and stuff like that. And I wrote to my two senators. Now, one's a Republican, one's a Democrat. And quite frankly, I could care less what party you're with. I have an issue, And my issue was not necessarily that the video was taken down, right? I mean, I said that to the two senators. I'm like, look, my video violated YouTube guidelines. I took all my other videos down. This is the one that I forgot to take down. It took it down. Okay. I own that, right? Because I violated it. The video is still out on other platforms. I own that I violated YouTube's policy. What I had a problem with was that these 5 senators just happened to, well, engage in censorship. It's not their office's job to enforce the policies of a private company or even a publicly traded company. It's not their job. There was no laws that were broken. And that's where, going back to your thing about how things can change. Mm-hmm. We need to be, and I even wrote in there, I go, my issue is not that the video got taken down. My issue is that if 5 senators can do this to a corporation where no laws were breaking, where does this go from there? Where does this stop? What else can they do? I mean, they can ruin someone's life on this stuff. And
yep.
And we need to stop this whole wishy-washy stuff, because even with this regulation coming down, it's still not a law. It's a regulation.
Right. And that's the importance of with Hold My Guns. It's a for gun owners by gun owners organization. And that is really why how it's making a difference in our own firearms community, because people know that everyone on our team are gun owners. We care about rights. And ultimately our goal is to support our own community. We have been offered opportunities to participate in grants and such that would have been very lucrative. And I have flat out said, no way, because there are strings that are attached that, it's, well, just let us know, like, who's storing firearms. Can you share information about that for, as we're collecting data? Or, can you just share this information about this other group over here that, well, it's about suicide prevention, but really, they're going to be, their whole goal is to try to reduce gun violence by, this is like, oh, wait a second. So we care about that. And for gun owners by gun owners is really the heart of what we're doing. And so much so, Jason, that's what we put on our brochure, for gun owners by gun owners, because we wanted people to know right away when they hear about our program that it is, it's not a wolf in sheep's clothing, that it really is from our own community. So I appreciate that you bring up Jordan, and he definitely has my support. I can't say that for the whole 501c3, but I mean, it is, but you understand.
That's a personal stance of yours.
It is my personal stance. And I would say it's probably the personal stance of everyone on my team. And I also want for people to, again, the takeaway is that these issues in our own firearms community are important, and they ultimately do affect all of us. So it is a very relevant thing to discuss, and we need to support him.
Awesome. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. He is a great guy, and I've had the fortunate, I've been able to talk to him. I finally physically met him, because we're halfway across the country from each other. I physically got to meet him at SHOT Show this year. And he is, when you talk to him, when you're standing in front of them, what you see is what you get. That's him.
Yes.
That is totally him. And
he's smart and mentally strong, and he knows the laws, and he also understands why they're in place, and he can argue hey, this thing over here, this is seems to be a contradiction. Like, so I love that he is wise to those things, and it's not just like, oh, okay, whatever you want. Like, he's like, wait a second, you're actually like lying about this, because this over here, like, so we need that kind of mental strength. And I appreciate him on many levels.
He has no problems transitioning from a t-shirt to a shirt and tie and running out over to Harrisburg and telling people.
Exactly.
And what's so funny, you talk about the gun show, is that's the gun show that he got kicked out of.
It is.
And then he
did it. And then he bought it. And, but the way that he And yet the
Oh, it was,
people who were instrumental in getting him kicked out, they still go to the gun show. And I have
yeah,
to say that when you have the kind of mental strength that Jordan Monroe has, and you live by your principles and values, and you don't live by running with your emotion on your sleeve, it allows you to diplomatically still talk to people who have wronged you, and to have to treat people with dignity from human perspective, but also know where he stands on things and not to compromise. And that is something I have a great deal of respect that he's the solution that he had to buy the gun show,
yeah,
but yet still is, hey, but these people are in our community, and I'm still going to have them, give them a booth here, and I'm not going to have this big emotional drama. It's just, hey, I'm the new owner, so you're just going to have to take it or leave it. And it was the biggest, most beautiful flex, and it really, instead of the way that happened, instead of creating drama from within our firearms community, it was like, okay,
it just it's funny because it just happened, right? I mean, there's a lead up, and so I did a whole podcast on fake drama. You know, it drives me nuts with the fake drama. He is definitely not a fake drama guy. He's
he's
just
not.
like, I'm going to look at this. Here's the facts. I'm going to argue on the facts. I'm going to make a decision on it, and then if I can't sway you, then okay, that's your opinion. But I'm still going to do what I'm going to do.
Right,
Um,
because he
and trust
lives
me,
by principles.
I
I
s- I
Yep.
see the pictures of those gun shows, and it's awesome, right? I mean,
He's breathed
it's so
life
fun,
into the gun show.
and
It's
and he's
so
got that
fun to be there
smile.
now.
He just
Yeah.
has that smile too, right? I mean, just when he smiles, just everybody relaxes,
Do you have a
right?
crush on him, Jason?
Yeah, a little
Wondering.
bit, but mostly because of his guns.
Okay, that's fair enough.
uh,
That's fair enough.
mostly because he came up with an 80% frame of a gun that I love.
Good.
Um, but no, it's one of those things I see that because like I've seen pictures of you and Genevieve, your co-founder, with like Joe from Shooting Gallery New England when he came down to
Yes.
the show. You know, I know Joe, and it's
That's
just
wonderful.
it's
Yep.
a great time. You know, I see Dark coming up from Virginia to those shows, and I see all these other content
Yes.
creators I know, and it is it's
Dark
just
is
a
also
good time.
brilliant. I absolutely adore
Yeah,
him, and don't have a crush on him, but I really do. He is someone that is genuine in person as he is online, and he genuinely cares about people. And
yeah,
something that we love to emphasize at Hold My Guns is the protective factor of the firearms community. And we're talking about people who are um like, I mean, they're kind of well known, but we're just normal people, right?
yeah,
Like Joe he's a normal guy, but people are like, oh my goodness, I watched Shooting Gallery New England, or we watched
yeah.
DLD After Dark, and yet they're approachable, and even though they have
Totally.
like this like celebrity status in our community, they're approachable people. Jordan's approachable, and I wish that the outside world, which on one hand I wish that, on the other hand I don't really care, but it makes me sad. I wish that
Yeah,
that people would realize how much our firearms community genuinely cares about one another. If I'm having a bad day and Tony Simon knows about it, I'm gonna get a text message from him,
yeah.
and
Tony's a great guy.
just or Beth Alcazar. I could tell her like, dude,
Yeah,
today's a frustrating day with my kids, and she'd be like, hang in there, Sarah, or whatever it might be,
yeah.
and so the friendships that are there, genuine people, that is how that's suicide prevention. And shooting together on the range with our friends who know what our baseline looks like, and they can tell if we're having a tough day. Like, hey, don't go alone today. I know you're having a tough time. Let me go to the range with you. I'll move a few things around. I'll see you at 4 o'clock, and let's talk and shoot. And so like people looking out for one another is so key. And that's something that when I was at the Girl in a Gun National Conference recently, I taught 6 courses for QPR suicide prevention. That's something we talked about a lot, and we brought into like you can customize the QPR, there's the core slides, but you can customize that curriculum to meet the needs of the audience. And so I included several slides and talking points about the beautiful protective factors that are within our firearms community. When I taught at the USCCA Expo in October last year, I taught a course called Threats from Within, Assessing Risk and Creating a Personal Safety Plan. I had a gentleman who was a veteran come up after me to talk to me after the one of the presentations, and he said, Sarah, as a veteran, people are like, thank you for your service. Are you thinking of taking your own life? Here's a pamphlet, and he's like,
Yeah.
he's like, maybe they're well-meaning, but it comes across as hurtful and insulting, because at the end of the day, I just feel like I'm just this one big risk factor walking around. I have PTSD. I've struggled with alcohol addiction. I've been through divorce. And so he said, what I learned today in your presentation is that I have protective factors too. And the fact that I shoot with my buddies on the range, that saves my life. And they know that, if they're like, hey, we're going to the range, and I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to make it to like, yes, you are, we're coming to your house.
Yeah.
Like, they know how to get me out of isolation. So he said, thank you for emphasizing with Hold My Guns and with your suicide prevention work, the protective factors. And people can have all the risk factors in the world, but if they have protective factors, just even one or two strong ones, like a spouse who loves them, or their dog, like I got to be there to take my dog out, and that's what's keeping me alive, because I love the joy that brings, right? And I want to be there for my dog, or shooting with friends, or whatever that might be. It is so important to recognize that in this scope of things, it's not as complicated as some would want it to sound. It's all about protective factors and risk factors. And if we can increase protective factors, then we decrease the gravity of those risk factors. And part of that is taking personal responsibilities to make sure that you have plans for your risk factors, that you have plans to increase your coping mechanisms and your interaction with people and things like that. So anyway, just it really is all about community and how we look out for one another.
The one thing I'm gonna use a pun here, no pun intended.
Okay.
You can have all the risk factors,
Mm-hmm.
but if you take the trigger away from it, you've mitigated the risk, right? So, I mean, that's the whole thing of going out with your friends. I mean, that's the whole thing. Is a lot of people, they just they internalize, right? Something's wrong. We tend to internalize. We don't want to be around people, but that's the best time to be around people, because especially the people that know you.
The people know you, the right people. Yes.
Right. The right people in your world. I know several veterans, and some of them, they've seen some very horrible things in their lives.
Yes.
In service. And, I've had one that, I talked to them, and I'm like, hey, you're not doing well. I mean, he went through a lot of change in his life, went through a divorce and stuff like that. And I'm like, you're not doing well. And he's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, you need to go seek some help. And he's like, yeah, I'm working on it. It's just, the VA is running a little slow. I'm like, hey, do we need to get a senator involved? And, whatever it is, I also know someone, it's another content creator. It's Ghost Tactical.
Yes.
He's got like the direct line right into the VA. Like he can cut some red tape if we need to. And he's just like, no, I'm good. I'm not that bad. But I'll let you know. I go, look, you really do need some help, because you're going to become one of the 22 push-ups. The road that you're on is not good. And it's the fortunate thing is that I knew him. We've known each other for a while, and I could see the triggers in him. Like, you're not doing well. And fortunately, he got a VA appointment that got sped up on him, and he got the help he was needed. I was talking to him just a couple of weeks ago, and he's a completely different person right now.
Good.
He's got the help. Because it's one of those things. You need the right people to be around you.
Yes.
And that's important.
Yes. And to respect choices too, because, of the number of veterans that die by suicide each day. And suicide is not just a problem in the veteran community or the service member community. It's everywhere. But statistically, I think a number that's a more recent number is 17. And I heard out of 17 veterans who die by suicide, that 11 are not connected to VA services. And so, I think it's very important that we encourage people like, hey, if you're not going to get help at veteran services, which you have the right to make that personal choice, what are some other options? And that's one of the things that we teach in QPR, is to not just refer people to random resources, but to get their personal buy-in to say, I don't care for this resource over here, but you know what, you're right, I'll give my pastor a call. Or I don't really like this particular clinician that you're recommending. However, Doctors for Responsible Gun Owners, they have some clinicians, and I will do that. And then as a follow-up, then we're like, hey, you said that you were going to give a call to your choice yesterday. How did that go? And so it's actively listening. It's treating people with dignity and respect, and it is empowering them to make their personal choices that work best for their lives. And that we need to see that as a win versus, taking personal offense if a person doesn't want to use our favorite resources. And again, many times we just get caught up in taking it personally. If someone doesn't, it's like, well, I gave you advice, you didn't take my advice. So,
you
here you are.
You can't shut down like that. That's
right. You can't.
The wrong thing to do.
That's the wrong thing to do. And so teaching people, that's, a big part of the QPR training, is teaching people how to talk to someone in crisis in a way that still gives that promotes their personal agency. And we know that when people have personal agency, then that they're not caught up in, worrying about having this is not exactly what I want, but then they can say, I'm actually focused on healing because I'm doing this in the way that works best for me. And that's what we want. We want for mental health treatment or personal choices to actually make a difference in a person's lives. It's not helpful if it's not helping that person. Otherwise, we're just pushing our own agenda on them, which again, that's why Hold My Guns is so important to me, is that it provides an option for people that they have the choice to do that. It's a voluntary service that we offer. And that's the beauty of it, that it's helping people in a way that promotes their personal decision-making.
Now, you mentioned the QPR and the Girl in a Gun. You were at the Girl in a Gun conference last month.
Yes.
And you had because we were trying to set this interview up back then, you gotta had like a major milestone for the amount of people. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, that was a pretty amazing achievement.
It was. It turned out to be so it was a really big event. There were including like vendors and stuff, there were probably like 700 people there, and it was a very like concentrated crowd. And the ladies were able to pick different courses, and so I ended up teaching 6 rounds with on average of 12 or 10. It's like 10 to 12, but like let's say an average of 10 per class. And so and they are all now certified in QPR. But it was phenomenal to see how. Yeah, in one event, to see that many women certified in QPR and hearing their personal stories. There are many women there who were affected by loss of losing a loved one to suicide, or women that have been through some horrible things in life and have at one point thought about taking their own lives. And the beauty of taking this class and having these discussions is then the other people in the class realize, like, wait a second, I'm not the only one. Or I realize that this is more prevalent than what I was tuned into before. And now I can actually appreciate that people that are really strong they're that way because they've been through a lot. And it helps us to tune in more to just the ups and downs in life and how normal it is to have ups and downs, but also to see what things helped that person to be resilient, or what they did in the aftermath of a loss that allows them to still be there today despite their grief. So it was amazing to get like that many people, and also in the firearms community, that is not lost on me. To actually be teaching suicide prevention, a credentialed course that actually counts for 2 continuing education credits,
Awesome.
is it's just a joy to do that. We started sponsoring QPR trainings, including myself and one of our board members, Paul Jones, who's involved with IDPA. By the way, he's wonderful. He's our treasurer. We decided to do this because we had a board meeting where one of our former board members, he said, "Hey, you'll never guess what happened today. There was someone that was." They had intended to take their own life, and that's why they signed up for my class. And I had to, I recognized some warning signs. And then Genevieve, my co-founder, she said, "Oh my goodness, I had a similar thing happen, and I stopped the lesson, and that person admitted that they were struggling with depression and that they probably shouldn't be around firearms." And in our conversation at our board meeting, we were like, wow, this is a
Strong.
concern.
Yeah.
As range safety officers and instructors, I don't really think that this kind of training is out there right now in the firearms community. So, just like with Hold My Guns, no one was really doing that. And so we saw a need to do it and to make it happen. So we did the hard work there, and we're taking seriously educating people with QPR. And our hope is that instructors and RSOs, when they have their list of credentials on their website or resume or whatever, that if someone is looking them up for the intent of taking their own life on the range, that instead they would say, "Hey, this person's certified in suicide prevention. Maybe they're an ally, someone that I can talk to and get help." And that's really our hope. And it also creates a totally different level of situational awareness that is often not discussed. Something that I was sharing with the ladies at the Girl in a Gun conference, which, by the way, ladies out there, A Girl in a Gun is a tremendous organization.
Yes, it is.
And they educate women, but also encourage women to like take total ownership of your lives. And I love it from that perspective too. And then you have the camaraderie of your tribe, and it's a very, very welcoming group. So check them out. But talking about the ladies with A Girl in a Gun, there were many gun shop owners and range safety officers and instructors in my classes. And something that we were talking about is how in the standard operating procedures, or the SOPs, like there's really not a lot in there about what do you do if someone is in crisis on the range. There are not, here's a number for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, or here are local crisis groups that work with our gun club that people that are available to help to talk to someone in crisis. There's nothing in those procedures that talk about like, if someone is in a suicide crisis on the range, how do we address that in a way that keeps the rest of the line safe? So my encouragement to the ladies at A Girl in a Gun, my students there, and also to people in our community everywhere, because even if you're not an RSO, you're still shooting on the line, right? Like to be familiar with resources, but also know how to talk to someone in crisis, and to know how to keep yourself safe too, because we have to take that into consideration if you're going to be talking to someone who has a loaded firearm. So these are all important things that I think that those standard operating procedures should include, but they really don't. And again, like if we just think, well, that's somebody else's problem and we don't address it, then that makes us more vulnerable. So we need to do a better job of that, but it needs to come from within our own community.
I'm going to say this is going to sound totally wrong, but I think you're going to get what I'm saying is that QPR training can be used offensively as well as defensively, right? It can be used, or I should say proactively, right? So if you have because let's face it, instructors are designed, they're taught keep muzzles downrange, keep bullets going downrange, everything's going downrange, don't go past, break the 180, all that stuff. But like you said, they're not really training for what happens if somebody is having a mental crisis right at that point. And, because now they're just like, they're going to be trying to yell at that person to keep the gun down range, which might have the direct wrong response, which is great because, if we're doing this training to instructors and range safety officers and gun shop owners and stuff like that, when we think of, I know as an FFL, when we think of mental health, we think of one line on the 4473, right? It's basically, are you adjudicated mentally defective? That's, as an FFL, literally that's the only training you get, and you don't even get training on that. You get training on what the correct answer is on the form.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to have that many firearm people understand that, and getting it on the front lines, that's where it really helps. That's
Right.
where we need it,
And
because
it's not even just on the range, like going back to what we were talking about earlier about community, if we're at our club meeting and someone stands up and says, oh, you're not going to be seeing my husband here anymore because we're going through a divorce. And so you have a knowledge of a situational risk factor that this person's going through a difficult divorce. And then you see your friend, your club member out in the range and she's by herself and she's crying. You're not, it's not like, oh, she's fine, I'm just going to ignore it. It's like, no, there are multiple clues here. And so I'm going to go over and say hi. And I'm going to say, how are you doing today? How are you really doing? I noticed that you're crying. I was at the meeting. I heard what happened. I'm really sad that this is going, can we go out for coffee? Can I hang out with you and shoot with you? Like, I'm here by myself today too. Can we hang out? That is the beauty of the community. We know baselines. We know, like, hey, normally this person's behaving this way, but and I see them at the range all the time, but today something seems off. And that, again, that's, we talk about situational awareness all the time, like, oh, that person seems like they've got something going on and maybe they're a threat. But really there are threats from within, and we can say, hey, I am going to go over and talk to my friend in the firearms community, and I'm going to make sure they're okay, and make sure that they if and maybe even ask that hard question. I'm just wondering, are you thinking of taking your own life? And then having that conversation, to say, that there are resources available. Can I go with you to help get help for you? What would work best for you? So that's a big part of the training that we encourage.
And just talking to somebody is incredibly therapeutic to the other person. I mean,
It is.
there's one thing that Ghost Tactical always says in his podcast is, go talk to somebody. If you see somebody having a problem, go talk to them, because you might literally be the only person that person talks to that day.
Yes.
And that could be the difference.
It
Right
really
there.
could. And how good does it feel? Like, people say, oh, I'm worried I might put a bad thought in that person's head. But how good does it feel when you're having a tough day and your friend actually notices? When, we notice when people notice, like if you get a haircut, right? Like, you might look in the mirror like, oh, I feel really good. And, like, or whatever it is, I have a new shirt or whatever it is. And by the way, I do have my, the Girl in a Gun conference shirt. I love this shirt.
Awesome.
So cozy. But we notice, we notice when people notice, like, hey, yeah, 5 people complimented me on my cool shirt today. Or we notice when people don't notice, and that can really hurt. And so we have to understand, like, if a person is suffering and people don't notice and they don't act, or they do notice and then they ignore that person, or they don't treat them in a compassionate way with dignity, people notice that too. So really, we can put all these fancy terms on there like QPR and suicide prevention and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it's about treating people as people and loving them. And, there's so much focus on, the gun, which, hey, we're in the community and we need to make sure that we have personal responsibility about firearms. But it really comes down to people and caring about the people in our circles of influence and loving them in a way that actually asks hard questions, just like we would want for them to do for us, and to be noticed when we're having a good day or a bad day.
I mean, these are our brothers and sisters, right? I
Yes.
mean, we are a community. The shooting sports is definitely a community. Firearm ownership is a community. When we're at a range and we're sitting there talking to someone, that's your brother and sister. right? They have the same, the same, sport as you. If you're afraid to talk to them, all you got to do is go up and go, "Hey, I like your gun." Right? If you have
Yeah.
nothing else, if you know
Nothing else to
nothing
say.
else, you can talk about that gun, right? And
Hmm.
then they might relax, and then it might lead you into the situation that it's not going to be comfortable asking someone, "Hey, are you thinking about taking your own life?" That's not going to be comfortable. But if you can get them to loosen up, and it may lead into something where you can at least go, "Hey, at least call the suicide prevention hotline," right?
Hmm.
I got my phone right here. I'll dial it for you
Right. And
and
I'll
just
stand
hand
right
it to
here
you.
with you.
I'll stand right here with you, and it'll all be good. Everything will work out. I'm here for you. Um, Standing together as a community is important, whether
Right.
it's mental health or regulations and laws. I mean, we all just need to be there for each other, no matter what the situation is.
Yes. And I can hear because I hear this a lot, and so it's just in my mind, well, why should I care about this person over here? Like it's just somebody at my club, but they're not my best friend or whatever. I want
It's
for
called being
people
a human.
It's called being human. I want for people to recognize that if it's not your day to have a hard day, your day could be coming. And that is a
Yeah,
normal thing to have ups and downs in life. And it is just the epitome of arrogance to think that that it doesn't matter what other people are going through. And what I have seen is that people who've had that attitude have had that adjusted in their lives in a big way sometimes. And it really goes back to humility and treating people with respect. We want to be respected. We need to treat other people with respect, and to recognize life is messy and that
yeah.
there are messy things going on. And you're right. We like, well, what's the 4473 care? Think, what does that say? And we can get so wrapped around the axle about the technicalities of things that we lose our humanity. It
We
doesn't have
do.
to be the business of you know whatever entities out there. This When we don't take personal stock of that, and when we don't um we're not aware of what other people are going through, like it creates this huge blind spot in situational awareness in our own lives and looking out for the lives of other people around us. And we always worry about, like, hey, can we spot the next mass shooter? That person, it could be us. It could be like,
Yeah,
we have to respect, like, people. There's so many stories out there about good people who hit a breaking point. There's a bazillion movies out there, right, about
yep.
that. And because they're based on real life things, good people hit a breaking point and something snaps. Let's try to help people before they get to that breaking point. And it starts with us. It starts with that I'm going in for arm surgery. How do I make sure that I'm okay? It starts with my best friends going through a messy divorce. How can I make sure that they're okay, or whatever it might be? My cousin's child is suffering from a childhood cancer. How can I help them out? And I'm not actually, that's not a scenario for me. I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
but we have had illnesses in our family that are really scary. And how many times do we see people are like, oh, I don't want to talk about that because that's just really awkward. And then instead we're missing out on the opportunity to make a difference in someone's life.
You
That's
know,
suicide prevention.
and, and that's the whole thing is I'd like to say to people there is yes, it'll be uncomfortable to ask the question, right? But how uncomfortable is it going to be if you don't ask the question and something bad happens?
Exactly.
That is going to be even more uncomfortable for you for the rest of your life. So
It will.
ask the question.
Ask the
Just
question.
ask it. It's one question. And then, if you don't know how to deal with it, there's a phone number.
Yes.
That's what
And
pull
what's
out
the
your
worst
phone,
case
dial the number.
scenario, right? Someone says, oh no, I'm not thinking about that. And then you might say, you know what? I'm glad, because I really
Yeah,
care about you. And if you ever are in a situation where you do need to seek help or to talk to someone, I'm here for you. And that's how you
yeah,
mitigate that, get over that, like, fear of, what if I talk to them and it's they're rejecting me. And
yeah,
at the very least, that person can walk away and realize, like, hey, they were way off here. but they actually cared enough to ask. And that's what and they treated me as a person. And again, we don't want to treat people like a big risk factor walking around, like thinking back to the conversation I had at the USCCA Expo, but we are instead acting as a protective factor to say, I'm here for you. And I'm here for you when you're having a good day. And I'm also here for you when you're having a bad day. And when you do that genuinely, just like our genuine friend Jordan Monroe, when we act in a way that is consistent with our values and principles, then people know that if we are having that conversation with them, it's because we care genuinely.
Yeah. Now we've been going for about an hour and 15 minutes. I got a couple more questions for you here.
Okay.
What are the goals for Hide My Guns for the rest of 2022?
Did you say hide my guns?
Hide my guns. Yeah. Sorry. Hold my guns. I did say hide my guns. Well,
I love it.
I guess it depends. Maybe hide my guns would be California or New York.
I don't know. You can't go there.
Hold my guns. Sorry.
One of the goals for Hold My Guns is to have a storage location in all 50 states. And what that does is, as we were talking before, like regulations are different from state to state. And I don't like regulations, but they're there and we operate in a regulated space for better, for worse. And so it's important to have, to consider that it can be an obstacle to gun owners who need storage if there's not a location near them. All of a sudden, maybe we don't want people, like, for example, crossing state lines and then committing a felony because they have, a high capacity magazine, which is like a normal magazine, right? Like a standard capacity magazine. So we have to take into considerations that that by having a gun shop partner in all 50 states means that people have better access to it. We did just announce a 5th storage partner recently, American Trailhead, and that was
awesome.
Right before that that they're in Georgia. And by the way, they're doing phenomenal work. They were just at the We Care Veterans Fair and they shared about Hold My Guns, and they heard some beautiful stories from people about surviving a suicide crisis, but also stories of loss. And we really appreciate how they advocate for this important work and that they're part of that. Randall Family Firearms is another one of our storage partners. They're in Washington. And that was recently announced too. Washington State has heavy regulations about firearms. So all of these considerations are things that we work very hard to make sure that our FFL partners are providing this service in a way that, technically it meets the letter of the law, but we have to make sure that it's done in a way that it removes those barriers, I'm trying to say. So anyway, we really can't do that without the support of our firearms community. And we are in need of sponsorships. We want to make sure that the mission of Hold My Guns is one that is gets out there, that gets the word out. There's a lot of hard work that goes on with a lot of volunteer hours behind the scenes to make it possible, but we would really like to just be able to expand. So if people are watching and they care about the mission, we ask that, share with businesses that might want to sponsor or private donors that want to invest in this and be part of our community, because we really cannot exist without those donations. And I would just be heartbroken if we had to stop, but that's the reality of it. So our goal is to get a gun shop partner in all 50 states. And then really after that is met, to have partners in all major cities across the United States. It would be amazing for this to be ubiquitous with owning a gun shop, that you care about your customers enough to help them out if they ever need it, which again, it doesn't just save lives and protects property, but preserves rights. So that's one of our goals. And then as we sponsor QPR trainings, our goal is to educate the firearms community in suicide prevention so that we can make a difference in a way that actually is appropriate for our community and taking into consideration, it's not just, do you have a firearm, but like, what does that mean? Like, yeah, it's normal to have a firearm. So how do we interact with people in our community who carry a gun every day? And what are some changes to baseline, that kind of a thing. So anyway, those are our goals, and I get excited about those things, and I love the support from our firearms community. Even in our recent brochure, which, by the way, you can download this brochure on the link in the bio for all of our social media. There were 2 photos that were donated. There was one from Jeff at USCCA and Delta Defense, and he's a like a video editor over there. He donated the picture in the top right, and then there was Matt Baines from Lobster Media, and Matt is a photographer for Shooting Sports. So just even having the support from our community is tremendous. Those are ways that people got involved. So download a brochure, share it with your local gun shop. There's a QR code if you'd like to donate to the cause that's on that brochure. And we really appreciate our community.
Now, donation, you are a 501c3 nonprofit,
Yes.
correct? So
Yes.
just for those who don't know what a 501c3 is, why is that important?
It is a designation for an entity that cares about the community and that does advocacy, but it is done in a way that is non-political, and that was important as well. It is certainly so we can't endorse candidates, but that's okay. That's the point is that it's non-for-profit, which means that we're not selling things, but we are advocating for the community to have something that benefits people.
Sure.
And that is why we chose to go with a 501c3, because we want for our community to be directly benefited from the mission. And we want for people to be able to interact with it in a way that is very clear. So that's why we chose it. And I'm sure there are other different ways to do it, but I felt that was the best way to pursue it.
That's the one that fit you.
That's the one that fit
Yep.
for us.
Yep.
And what I have found too is that, again, like we do care about things like preserving rights, but there are people from all walks of life who are gun owners. And so I appreciate that we have that common right to be able to defend ourselves and to bear arms. And that really is the heart of why we're doing what we're doing, to save lives and protect property and preserve rights. So, yeah.
And anybody is going to make a donation to Hold My Guns, talk to your tax professional, because your donation may be tax deductible.
Yes.
So definitely talk to your tax professional about that, because it depending on how you're filing, you could get a deduction for helping out your fellow gun owners.
Yes.
So definitely consider that when you're looking at making a donation to an organization.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then last question I have for you.
Sure.
What can people do if there's a mental emergency right now? Like right now, this is happening. We kind of talked a little bit about it. Like on that range, I'll dial someone for you. What can they do right now?
Right now could mean a bunch of different things. And if there is someone who is actively trying to take their own life, it is an emergency, and that is a 911 situation. If a person is harming themselves or is in the middle of trying to harm themselves, it needs to be treated with that level of emergency. If a person is in an emergent situation and they need firearm storage, they can reach out to us and we can help them connect with gun shops, even ones that might not directly be a partner, but we do have, because it takes time to get all these partnerships going.
Yes.
So it's not that some gun shops aren't even aware that we exist. So what we do when people are in need of storage, we start asking in our community, hey, are there any FFLs in this area that could help this person out? And, we direct that person to the FFL and say, hey, see if they can, they said that they can help you. So, and we've actually had a few calls like that. So, that is something that people can do if they immediately need storage, is they can reach out and we can go to the community and do our best to help find storage for them.
So even if you go onto the webpage, because you have the finder, and there's not
Mhm.
an FFL around you, at least contact the organization to see if there's something you guys can do.
Right. And also
Awesome.
because we care and we want, if there's someone in our community who is in crisis, we genuinely care and we will do our best to help to refer you to resources that can make a difference in your life.
Okay. And I lied. I do have one more question.
Okay.
What can we do to take the stigma away from mental health?
I think that's a good question. Thank you. I think that the most important thing that we can do is humbly recognize that any of us at any time could find ourselves in crisis, and to take that approach when we talk to people, to just humbly recognize that, so that we're not being judgmental in our own lives and be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this terrible thing just happened to you,
Yeah.
but instead say, you know what, bad things happen to good people. We're all in this together. How can I help? That reduces stigma. Um, how do we reduce stigma in pertaining to firearms? We are responsible then when we practice self-governance, and we're not relying on other people in order to figure out what works best for our personal situations. But in order to do that, we have to take personal responsibility and not blame shift. And that's really why I started Hold My Guns, is because I didn't want it to just be like a theory, like, oh yeah, you should probably go do something about that. You should probably go find someone to store your firearms with right now. But not
Yeah.
everybody has that option. So taking personal responsibility reduces stigma. And then being vocal in our community and even to the outside people outside of the gun community, which there are, by the way, a lot of gun owners out there. So it's not,
It's a lot of gun owners.
right. So like there really aren't a lot of people outside of a responsibility or community as much as people would like to think. Like there are a lot of gun owners out there. It's actually a majority of people. But if you are vocal about that, to say, hey, like our community actually cares about people, gun ownership is normal. It's normal to have ups and downs in life, and we have a plan. That helps to reduce stigma too. And what I found in just hearing from different communities who are trying to solve concerns about firearms and suicide or violence or whatever it is that a lot of times people don't have a plan. And so they just kind of go with whatever seems like it's the most put together plan. And in order to reduce stigma, we need to take responsibility in our community to actually have a plan for things and to follow through with them. Just kind of like going back to the standard operating procedures for ranges and gun shops. Like if we don't have a plan, then we can't be angry when other people, I mean, we can, but,
Yeah.
right. But we also, it's very hypocritical for us to be like, why do these other people have a plan? Well, you don't have one. And so at the end of the day, what do you have to show for it? So I think, how do we reduce stigma is we don't just have a heart for people, but we actually create processes that actually care about protecting rights and that meet people's needs, and that we execute them in a way where, again, back to Jordan, whose personal values are consistent in all areas of our lives, and that reduces stigma as well.
Awesome. Where can people find your mission?
You can find us online on our website at holdmyguns.org. And then we're also on LinkedIn, and you can look up our organization there. And then you can find us on our social medias at holdmyguns.org. So we look forward to seeing you there. And if you follow us, then shoot me a DM and I'll follow you back. And I just love our community, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to people today, to talk to you. And I hope that that you're encouraged and that listeners have some food for thought after this, as they usually do from your show. You do a great job.
Thanks. And for everybody listening or watching the podcast, I will have the links to Hold My Guns and the social media pages down in the description below. So that way you can just click on them and go, and you don't have to worry about just doing the Google thing. So that way we can get you directly over to them, and that way you can learn about Hold My Guns, because this is really, I mean, to me, this is a really important mission that you're on.
Thank you.
We always hear politicians going, hey, look, we got to do something about the mental health crisis. Man, that's the wrong people to be trying to fix a problem that is a very difficult problem. I mean, there's not a, you know, a Band-Aid fix on this thing. You know,
Right.
sometimes it's a gauze pad. I mean,
We're trying to get,
so,
yeah.
and the last thing we want to do is give certain politicians more reasons to take something away from us. So definitely go support the mission, because um, this is truly a noble mission that Sarah's on.
Thank you.
And Sarah, we have a couple minutes left. Would you be up for a speed round?
Sure.
Okay. Rifle or pistol?
Rifle.
22 long rifle or 223?
22 long rifle, because that's what we teach at our youth rifle league, and that's
I
what I love.
I kind of had a feeling that that's the way that you would go with that, knowing the whole youth rifle.
My EDC though is a 9mm Shield Gen 1. So
Nice.
yeah.
Blued finish or stainless steel finish?
Stainless steel.
Wood stock or composite?
Wood stock. My dad's a carpenter.
There you go.
I love it. Yeah.
Plus, there's a lot of trees in Pennsylvania.
There are. Yeah.
Iron sights or red dot?
Iron sights.
So for secure firearm storage, cable lock or trigger lock?
Oh, I use cable locks.
Okay. And if you could have any one gun that's ever existed in the world,
Oh my
what would you
goodness.
choose?
Oh. Well, I really love the Barrett 50 cal, and somewhere around here I have a round on my desk, and that's like the picture that's on my profile. So I think that was, if I could own that, that'd be really nice.
Yeah, that's on my bucket list of guns.
You can feel like the force of the shot, like it blew my hair back. It was really, I was like, yes, this is an immersive experience.
I'm gonna grab something here.
I don't know where I put it.
There we go. So my wife bought me this one time. So it's solid silver. And what is it? Man, I'm getting really blind. So it's 10 ounces of silver, and it's a 50 cal round. And she gave that to me. She says that's the closest you're going to get to a 50 cal.
Barrett makes nice firearms.
Yeah. Mostly because she knows that the gun is the cheapest part of that.
Yes. But for a special occasion when you're feeling extra, yes.
My problem with shooting a Barrett or any 50 cal would be going through my head is every time I pull the trigger, I'd be going $5.
Yeah, that's how many hours of work they have to like, yeah. Yep. Good times.
So, great. Thank you so much for coming on. And like I said to everybody in the audience, we'll have the links down below. Guys, that was a great conversation with Sarah. I learned so much from it. And there's something that everybody can take away from this. Now, I know there's a couple of FFLs out there in the audience. Please consider this type of service for the industry. If it fits your business model, reach out. See if you can help further this mission of Hold My Guns. Now, mental health means a lot of things to a lot of people. It'll mean something completely different to you than it does to me. Regardless of what it means to you, whether what it means to me or someone else, we need to address this issue. Check out Hold My Guns. Now, I know I screwed up at the end there, and Sarah called me out. I screwed up the name of Hold My Guns. I'm sorry, Sarah. She knows I've been up since about 1 o'clock. I had about 4 hours of sleep that night. I was tired, and it caught up to me. And I do apologize for that. But guys, definitely, this is a great organization. It's a nonprofit. Help them out with their mission. Definitely check with your tax professional to see if your donation to Hold My Guns is tax deductible. If you're looking for worthwhile, agencies or nonprofits or whatever in the firearm industry, this is it, right? This is it. Definitely consider making a donation. Thanks for listening. Hope you're staying safe out there, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.